Okay, everyone, welcome. It's so nice to see some of your smiling faces here live. And we're joining again for our monthly Ayurveda and trauma healing workshop, where we dive into Ayurvedic psychology as well as various topics just on healing past imprints, rewriting our kind of triggerable tendencies, our sensitivities to the world around us if we identify as a highly sensitive person or just someone who has a hypervigilant or excessively excitable nervous system. We want to learn all the tools and techniques to calm those responses down so we can connect with our center and not feel reactive to the world and also drained by the world. Also, for those of us who feel like more tending to the empathic side, where we're always feeling everybody's emotions or the stresses of the outside world, and we tend to internalize those, bogs down your digestion or has you feeling just unnecessary tension, stress, strain. So we, in these workshops, we like to talk about all these different topics and give you both the educational understanding through this beautiful, vast, oceanic lens of Ayurveda, while simultaneously bring it down to the practical application of what can I do in my day here now or when one of these things comes up. And so we talk about proactive practices as well as therapeutic practices to work with acute practices in the moment. So these are just some of the broad umbrella topics of our time together here today. And today's topic, as most of you probably saw in the email or on one of the posts that I shared about today's class, this month's community workshop, is we want to go into this topic of freedom from the past. And, you know, as we're all aware, if we're in this conversation, those kind of lingering past pains can embed themselves in our body, like as a somatic memory. We might not always have a visual memory, or when we're feeling triggered or highly sensitive to the world around us, we might not be acutely aware that there's a memory that's intruding our thoughts. It might just be a felt sense embodied experience, or there's something really subtle in the environment that causes us an emotional reaction to feel a certain way, fear or anger or frustration or sadness or confusion or numbness, or just like a tension that we can't explain. And so these are somatic memories. And if the actual trigger to them, if our reaction actually feels more heightened than what our rational mind is experiencing, where we're like, I don't know why I feel like this flood or this overreaction to what just happened, or I don't even know what just happened that made me feel a certain way, then we can almost assuredly know that there's some kind of painful past memory that has hijacked my mind, that has clouded my perception, that has veiled my ability to see reality as it really is and respond neutrally. So it can override our nervous system into a fear-based response where we go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? And for those of you who haven't heard this term fawning, it's kind of like it's one of the fight or flight responses, but it's the one where we just go into yesing and pleasing, because that was an adaptation of survival from society, from early childhood. That was one of the ways we could survive. So it's now included in this fight, flight, freeze, fawn as a sympathetic response to stress and triggers. So if you ever find yourself in any of those four scenarios where you feel afraid or like just energetically like I want to move away from something, flight, or you feel like agitated or angry or want to like make right or feel justified in, whatever frustration that is, fight, freeze. I go numb. I can't even feel what's in my body. I don't even know what's happening. I go deer in headlights. Or fawn, I just instantly react with yes and pleasing and doing anything to try to soften or sweeten the situation, regardless of what it was, even if it's to my own detriment. So, those are some of the responses. If you ever find yourself in any of those kind of reactions, well, then there's something that's hijacked your nervous system, that your body is going into this. And there's a root. And so that's really what we want to explore today is what's at that reaction. And there's a therapeutic process. I don't believe that it's wise or safe or effective to just go straight to the root of whatever that traumatic memory or painful imprint was. There's an actual therapeutic process to be able to address and slowly, gently bring that to the surface. And so we'll talk about that today too. But these are some of the things that we deal with as humans. There's lots of ways that we deal with this on so many levels. Of I won't get into all of that right now, but there's so many different levels that we experience these types of reactions. And so today's workshop, we want to focus in a little bit more on freedom from the past specifically. And in order to explore that, we need to explore the questions like, what is mind? And we want to talk about what is mind, not from a Western neurochemical perspective, because there's plenty of, intelligent information, knowledge around that out there. But what is mind from the Ayurvedic perspective, from the ancient wisdom traditions? Of course, there's a merging there. Of course, we essentially are all talking about the same thing. But I want to give you a new lens to look at, well, what is this mind? What are these thoughts? Where are they coming from? And if you've been studying some of the Eastern thought, I guess, so to speak, or some of the ancient traditions, you already have a little bit of sense of what that might be. And I'll give you a hint. You have a mind, you're not the mind. You have thoughts, but you're not the thoughts. So understanding what mind really is through this lens is incredibly freeing and is the first step for us to inquire into how do we rewrite these patterns. Okay. And then there's different layers of understanding what is mind. I can understand it from a cognitive level, then I can understand it from an emotional level, and I can understand it from an embodied level of like really knowing something in my body. So the first phase is to understand something conceptually, and then you finally embody it and like really know it in your bones, so to speak. And then we want to explore the connection between this mind, said mind, and the body, and understand how they relate so that we can understand some of our body signals and body cues. And this is kind of what I already alluded to, a few of the body cues in those 4 sympathetic responses that would have us react in a certain way. But then how does that affect body on deeper layers as well, not just in the immediate acute effects, but in the longer term effects. And then, of course, ultimately the question that we're all asking, which we need to understand the context of those first 2 inquiries, what is mind and how does mind affect body? But we want to understand, like, okay, how do I resolve this? What do I do to resolve? And that's when we'll talk about the therapeutic phases of resolving past pain imprints and also becoming free of the past. Because as my dear teacher, Dr. Vasant Lad, always says, the past is dead and gone. So we have to live in the eternal present in order to heal. But what's interesting is that our bodies, they're remembering the past emotion. So in the now, your body will remember a past emotion when it's triggered something that has been unresolved. So we do have to go into the parts of ourselves that have that memory and experience, support them gently and lovingly to come into right relationship with those experiences, reprocess and resolve them. And then it's actually, we can live in the eternal present because we're no longer pulled and snapped back. So it works both ways. We don't just live in the eternal present in order to forget the past, which is important, but we do need to go in that direction. But we also can free the imprints of the past in order to be able to live in the now, here and now. And in that, your energy back to your center. You feel more like you set yourself. The parts of you that have been scattered in different energetic places and spaces all come back to you, and you can experience that wholeness, that fullness, that groundedness, or simply that serenity or peacefulness or clarity of mind. So I hope this is making sense so far, and so happy. Hi, B. Hi, Anna, and Jan. There's Maria. There's a few others who have joined. So thank you all for joining in. And Cynthia, nice to see you, Cynthia. Okay. So yeah, hope this is making sense so far. And and that's kind of just introductory, but let's go into the session for today, which, how do I close this box? Okay. Which each session we start with practice, because I don't want this to just be an information session where lots of information is just coming at you, which can be great too, and very transformational just in terms of like receiving a lot of insight that your being can continue to integrate. And that happens as well. But it's nice to gather here in community to do a little bit of practice together, and for you to have that experience, which then you can take into your everyday life and practice each day. And as I'll share with you later, as we get into the therapeutic process, this is the practices that are kind of abridged versions, just for the sake of like open community here. I can't personalize things for each of you. So I do kind of simple versions of practices, but these are safe practices that you can do every day that starts to help establish you in the foundation of phase 1 of the therapeutic process. So as we do them, do your best to just really drop into it and remember them. You can always come back to this recording, of course, which you'll all get via email and will be on my YouTube channel. But you can do these practices every day, and just to connect to a sense of self and to start laying the foundation each morning of calm, grounded centeredness. So we'll do a few simple breathing practices and mantra breath practice. I'll read one inspiring meditation poem from our favorite book. And I'll chant it in Sanskrit and read it, and we'll have a moment to just contemplate, and then we'll actually dive into the topics that I just introduced around freedom from the past. Okay, sound good? So let's start with a little bit of breath practice. So the first practice, or to set up for your practice, come into a comfortable seat. Feel your hips are rooted. If you're sitting in a chair, you can have your feet flat on the ground. If you practice yoga or are comfortable sitting cross-legged and your spine is still long, you can do that. Just make sure your hips allow for an openness of your diaphragm. So you shouldn't be slouched where it's hard to breathe. If anything, your pelvis should be tilted a little bit forward so you can really let the belly relax and fill with air. Or we stretch it while our lungs fill with air and the diaphragm pushes belly down and relaxes it. So find that comfortable seat first and foremost. Roll the shoulders up, back, and down a couple times. Up, back, and down. Up, back, and down. And then press the shoulders down towards the floor, just releasing any tension that sometimes comes in. There, you can give your head a little bit of a wiggle just to help release the tension out of the neck and feel where your head is in space. And just take, I don't know, 2 or 3, just like full deep breaths in whatever way you normally do, just to feel like you're flushing out your breath and connecting to your body. Good, at your own pace. Do a couple more. Good, and then as you did those breaths, you probably noticed, where did the breath go? Did it go more into the chest? Did it go more into the ribs, like that just beginning opening of your solar plexus? Or did it go down into the lower part of your belly? I'm just making note of where that was today. And now we're going to start with the belly. So just exhaling all your air out. And then slowly inhaling. Our focus here in the first belly breathing is to allow the belly to be relaxed and to soften open. So it kind of expands out. Like a lot of times in society we take a big breath in, we create this tight belly and this like false kind of superhero chest. And instead of that, we're relaxing and letting our belly be big and hang and love it for exactly as it is. It's soft, and some people like to call it Buddha belly. So chest stays relaxed and lower belly is soft. And as you inhale, you can place your hands on the belly. As you inhale, belly should move towards the hands. And then as you exhale, you kind of draw the navel towards the spine and it pushes a little more air out. So exhaling a little more air out. And then each in-breath fills a little bit more without forcing. So exhale, draw the navel towards the spine. Exhale a little bit more air out, elongating the exhale more and more. And then inhaling, belly becomes soft. It softens into your hands, expanding into your hands. Exhaling, navel moves towards the spine. And just try to get the breath slower and slower as you can. The slowness is even more important than the fullness at this point. And for some of us, it's helpful if you engage a little bit of that Ujjayi breath, which I like to call the ocean breath. So you, in the same way that you would fog up a mirror, you make that same breathy sound, but your mouth is closed. And that breathy sound is internal. So you just inhale, and you can hear this breathy sound, and then you exhale. And making an audible sound to yourself, and it slows the stream of air. So it allows you to more easily slow the breath down. So if that appeals to you, you can take the next 2 or 3 breaths with a slightly constricted throat, making that ocean breath sound. And when you sit with this breath for a while, it just sounds like the ocean gently lapping in and out. It's very calming. And you allow that sound to get quieter and quieter so that it's only audible to you. It wouldn't be audible to anyone sitting next to you. And it draws your awareness and your senses more internal into yourself. If at any point, any practice that I'm guiding you through makes you feel uncomfortable, you just stop. It's fine. Good job. Now that we engaged that lower belly and really helped it to soften, we're going to engage the other two parts of your breath. So first is the lower belly, and then the second part is your rib cage. So if you put your hands kind of below your chest at the rounded part of your ribs, when you inhale, the belly gets soft, and then the third and final part is the chest. So start by placing your hands on the lower belly. Exhale all the air out, long, slow exhale. And then sip air into the lower belly like you just were. And then sip air into the ribs. Move your hands up, expand the ribs, and then all the way up to the chest in 3 parts. And now exhale from the chest, and then the ribs, and then the belly. So 3 parts, sipping air in, belly, ribs, and chest. Exhale, chest, ribs, belly. Inhale, belly, ribs, chest. Exhale, chest, ribs, and belly. Do a couple more at your own pace. Now smooth it out if you haven't already. Smoothly inhaling, belly, ribs, chest without distinction. And then exhaling from top to bottom, chest, ribs, belly. Inhaling, belly, ribs, chest. Exhaling, chest, ribs, belly. And a couple more of those nice, smooth, 3-part breath into all the quadrants, or all 3 areas. And release, and just allow your breath to be natural, normal, wherever it is right now. Through this practice, these practices of pranayama, they are the restraints, deliberate movements. You're deliberately controlling to some degree the movements of your pranayama. And the prana is the subtle energy that animates your body to be alive. And the pranic body, you have 5 bodies. You don't just have a physical body and a mental body. You have 5 bodies. I won't go into those in this moment, but the pranic body is the interface between, it lives as the interface between the physical body and the mental emotional body. And so when you learn these practices, and most importantly, when you do them every day, you are conditioning the prana and the exchanges to be smooth between the body and the mind. And that's what you want. You want prana to come in and soften and open places that it's stuck. And you want healthy communication between body and mind. So, another reason to practice these every day. And they seem simple, but you deliberately and intentionally moving your prana in even just these most basic ways is profound for the integration and reconciliation between body and mind. So the next breath is a version of Brahmari pranayama, which is the bee humming breath. It is a simpler version that's appropriate for all people at all times. The full Brahmari pranayama has some contraindications, and so it's not applicable to everyone all the time. But this practice of, which is similar to the bee humming breath, is just a humming breath, to be honest. And it will help create a soothing effect in the nervous system and calm the mind. And it's healing as well because you are producing sound with your own vocal cords, and then you are receiving that sound through your ears and vibrating in every cell of your body, which creates a soothing, relaxing, therapeutic effect. And so this breath and then the mantra breath, which is the next one, are two that I always suggest you use, particularly if you always use them proactively, but particularly you can use these at any time if you're feeling off or you found yourself in a reactionary state and they help you come back to center. Or if you're very aware that your inner child, for example, has been triggered and is feeling unsafe, then you can reparent the inner child, so to speak, through this practice of soothing them. So it's like a self-soothing practice. So you can also visualize lovingly taking that inner child into your arms and doing the humming and the mantra breath. And I find that in my practice, working with clients, this is a very effective tool to have in your pocket that you can support the feeling of safety of the inner child. So the humming breath will engage the three-part breath that we just practiced together. Full deep inhale, belly, ribs, and chest. But then you exhale also from top to bottom, but you exhale with a humming sound. So when you do the humming sound, you make a shape with your mouth that is most comfortable. You use the tone that feels most soothing and comfortable for you. It doesn't have to match my tone. And then your teeth are a little bit apart, but your lips are closed. So you should feel this humming vibration like through your head, and then it should travel through your body. So we'll do 3 breaths together very simply. First, exhale all your air out, and then full deep breath in, exhaling with the longest humming sound you can make 3 times. And on this last one, press your tongue to the roof of your mouth and make different shapes with your tongue and notice how the sound might slightly change. Pause and notice. Beautiful. And then the final practice today for pranayama is a mantra breath. And in this, we make 3 sounds. So it's the same full 3-part breath in, and then you exhale with the sounds ha, ri, and om. These 3 sounds circulate that vibrational energy through your body and is also very soothing to the inner child. And it's also a way to connect with the divine, because one of the names of the divine is Hari. And Om is the seed sound, bringing us back to the source of where we came from, the source of creation and creator. So exhale all the air out. We'll do 3 Hari Om breaths together. Full deep inhale, all 3 parts. And exhale with Hari Om. Hari Om. Hari Om. Pause and notice. And when you do these at home, you can chant and do the humming breath and all the breaths as long as you want. The way that they're presented here, they're safe to do. You don't have to count. You can safely do them for very elongated periods of time in a way that feels most supportive for you. Adharashvatava shaktya jnanachittalayena va jata shakti samashvesha kshobante bhairavam vapu. You are stunned, powerless. You thought you knew what was going on. Now you realize you don't have a clue. You are stopped in your tracks. Everything within your skin is shaking. Enter this shaking. Get curious. Look around inside with wonder. Unmind your mind. All the walls have fallen down. Go ahead and dissolve. The one who has always been, who has seen much worse than this, is still here, right here with you now. Darishvatava Shaktya Gyanachittalainava Jatha Shakti Samavesha Kshobante Bhairavam Vapu. This reading for today, just on the topic of freedom from the past, because one of our fears is, of course, to face and remember the source of whatever is causing the distress in this moment. There's also a fear that the emotions will take us over and we won't be able to function. And so we have parts of us that protect those hurts from overwhelming the system. But at some point, the hurt parts need tending to, because it only builds and builds over time. And so this prayer poem, sutra, from the Radiant Sutras from Sri Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, it's one of the poetic interpretations of that text, is reminding us that the source of our freedom is through it. So you're stunned, powerless. You thought you knew what was going on. You realize you don't have a clue. So I'm at the bottom. I am powerless to change. I have to, if I've hit the bottom, the only way to go is up. There's only one way out. When we're really at the pit of an emotional despair or challenge in our life, how true is that paragraph, right? You're stopped in your tracks. Everything within your skin is shaking. And in this, divine is telling us, don't be afraid of that shaking. Enter into that shaking. Get curious about it. Look around inside with wonder, with curiosity, with compassion. In Ayurvedic terms, or how Dr. Ladd would teach it, with direct perception, without judgment. You're just innocently looking. There's no shame. There's no blame. It's just listening to the parts of us who have had these memories with love and compassion, the parts of us that were frozen in time, that are identifying with or stuck in that past imprint or experience. We can innocently look and get curious without judging. And that's really all the parts of us who have experienced pain or these past imprints. That's really all they're needing, all they're really craving and wanting. So enter into this shaking, even if you don't cognize it or understand it as like a part of you that was hurt. Another way to look at it is just as a somatic experience. This shaking, this sensation, this trembling isn't something to be feared. What if we got curious about it? What if we entered into it with innocent eyes of wonder, right? With compassion, without judgment. All the walls have fallen down. Go ahead and dissolve. The one who has always been, who has seen much worse than this, is still here. When we are in the grip of the challenging hijacking of the nervous system, when we're in the grip of fear or fear that has taken over the system. That fear would have us believe that there's no way out. But the truth is, when we actually face it, when we actually enter into it with that compassion, with that curiosity, with that wonder, it doesn't have power over us anymore. It dissolves. And on the other side of that dissolution is the truth that the one that we were created from is right here with us as our dearest, most friend, as our dearest, most ally. Right here, right now, always, always, always with you, even if there's a part of you that believes it's alone and can't make it through. Please remember this. So, backing up, back to our first inquiry of what is the mind? What is mind? Where, how can we understand this faculty that we have? How does mind interact with the body? And then how do we resolve these imprints and actually gain freedom from the past? So from an Ayurvedic perspective, the spiritual North Star in Ayurvedic psychology, the North Star of spirituality is first and foremost, it's inextricable from psychology whatsoever. That is what makes it different from modern Western psychology, is that each being is believed to be, which we've shared in other workshops, Purna, Om Purnamida Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Mudachyate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate. We, each of our souls, is an emanation of the divine light, if you will. We can utilize this imagining of a candle. And when you have a candle flame that is lit, how many candles can you light from that flame before the flame is taken out? Innumerable, right? Nothing is taken away from the candle flame when you light the candle. So like that, our soul is, or our higher self, or our true self, or our just capital S self, is an emanation of the divine. But that means it is whole and complete, untouched, unscathed, unhurtable, immovable, eternally connected to its divine parent. It's the flame that it emanates from. And it's Om Purnam. So Purnam is wholeness, is fullness. So God, universe, however you uniquely connect with your creator, source energy, is whole and complete. And therefore, our soul is whole and complete, which also means it's omnipresent, omnipotent, it's all knowing, and it's all connected, and it's completely, it permeates every inch of existence while simultaneously being localized into this identity. So you are simultaneously both and, because in the spiritual world, there are no dualities. There are no black and white. There's no good, wrong, right, bad, limitations. You're completely limitless. Your soul is completely limitless. So this understanding that we are emanations of the divine and our soul is unscathed, untouched, unhurt, coming into this body, we obtain faculties, and we obtain so that consciousness can experience itself, the one can experience itself as the many through innumerable unique and expressions and experiences. And this is what we understand to be our persona or our personality or our ego. Ego, the word ego, as I'm speaking it, has no negative connotation, no connotation in any direction, positive, negative. It's just simply our sense of I am and our sense of identity and a unique way that the divine has expressed through you in all of your quirks and likes and dislikes and preferences and inclinations and skill sets and abilities, natural or acquired. It's a unique essence of you. So this is how consciousness, this great aspect of oneness, comes into a little droplet of that ocean and identifies as a localized sense of self. So that localized sense of self has this faculty or this energetic organ, as I've called it in past classes, called the mind. In more precise terms, this is called antakarana. Antakarana means not just the mind. Mind is like one piece of the antakarana, but antakarana is how we experience life through this localized perception, this localized bindu or point, centralized consciousness. So, from this centralized point of consciousness, I'm experiencing the world around me. And in order to experience the world around you, you are given these 5 sense faculties: the sense of sight, taste, touch, sensation, sight, smell, and hearing. Shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha in Sanskrit. So we are given the opportunity to hear, to smell, to see, to sense, to taste. And in that, those sense perceptions need to be digested into meaning. So your antakarana there's several energetic organs, faculties within your ability to perceive, which I won't go into in great detail today, but I just want you to really understand that you are a being of expansive oneness, localized into a unique experience with an identity, and you have this energetic organ that allows you to perceive life from your centralized position. So you perceive life and you start to interpret life and make meaning out of what you're seeing. So in a purest sense, you're looking out your window and you see a tree. Your eyes take in this image of tree, and your chitta, or this is part of the part of you that holds imprints, it remembers, it pulls from the smriti, or the bank of remembrance, and it's from your memory, and it says, oh, I know what this shape, this color, this texture, this context of what this thing is. This means tree. It applies a label, and it creates a meaning from that. Now, 50,000 people can look at a tree and all have different experiences of what that tree means to them. So another term for your ego in Vedic terms and Ayurvedic psychology is the within the antakarana you have the ego, and ego in Vedic psychology is called ahamkar, which means the I am maker. Ahankar. Aham means I am. Kar is like karma. It means action. So it's the one that makes the I am. Also known as ahamkar is ego. This is sense of self, sense of identity, and it's also the meaning maker. So from your localized perception, from your storage banks of imprints and memories, and this prana that's flowing in through your eyes, prana carries it from your eyes into these faculties to help you make sense of what it is that you're seeing. It's the sense-making ability. It's the meaning maker. And like I said, 50,000 different people are looking at that same tree, they're all having a different experience of what tree is. Some of them are having memories, sweet memories of sitting under a tree with a beloved when they were first falling in love. Or some of them are having memories of gathering sap out of a tree and making medicine out of it. Some are having memories of a bird's nest that they found in a tree when they were a little kid, and they found these after the little birds hatched. There were these blue little eggs, and and they watched the birds go off, and they watched the parent birds feed them, right? Like, some people are looking at that tree and the cat ran up it and got stuck, and it's loaded. It's not just a tree anymore. Everybody, all these people have completely different experience. Some people see a tree and they're horrified. They remember, when they were a kid, and this is in certain cultures too. I remember with a very dear client of mine years ago, she was taught to never go outside because her father told her, if you go outside, you're gonna flood. And constantly, this is what was drilled in. So she was terrified of nature. She couldn't experience some of the healing benefits that some of us experience in nature. So she might look at a tree and be terrified. Oh gosh, if I go near that tree, I'm going to get in trouble. My dad's going to yell at me or punish me. Or I'm going to hit my head and die and cause my parents like the worst pain and suffering. So I better not go anywhere near that tree, or I'm going to avoid that tree. Right? Can you even imagine the infinite possibilities of what someone would see differently, like all the infinite possibilities of differences? And so reality is just what it is. We don't see anything through a clear lens. Everything's loaded with the meaning that we've made. And it's clouded by one of the very first faculties of your mind, which is called manas. So the very first thing that, prana brings the impression of the tree into our eyes. And then we have an immediate response of duality. I like it, I don't like it. That's like, and sometimes it's a visceral, like, yes, no, I like it, I don't like it. I wish something was different about it, or I want to, I want to move towards something that better. I want to move towards it, or I'm going to move away from it. Some people will look at it and think, oh, I could chop that tree down and make a bunch of money. They look at things with an exploitive lens of like, what can I gain from this thing that I see? Right? There's just infinite different things. But the first thing that comes in, this is what's called manas, which is most of these aspects of the faculties of the mind are non-translatables into English. But meaning we need to just learn the Sanskrit terms, and you need to just develop an understanding of what each of these terms means to you, and then you learn how to work with them therapeutically inside of yourself. But oftentimes when we hear, I'm trying to loosely translate them into English just so you can kind of start to comprehend and understand the meanings, we can then discuss the greater application of it. But we have these two faculties within us. First is just the part that keeps us in suffering, which is manas, which is when you hear a lot of Vedic philosophical thought, or just general Eastern thoughts around mind keeping us in the source of suffering. That's the aspect of mind, because the mind can actually also liberate us. In fact, Dr. Vasant Ladd says the mind exists for the purposes of experience and liberation of the soul. The mind exists for the purpose of experience and liberation of the soul. You could choose to just experience life and experience pleasures and pains of life, or you can actually utilize the mind to liberate the soul. Now, the soul, on a second note, is already free, technically. The soul, because it's an emanation of pure, complete wholeness, right? But your soul has been sheathed by what we call the Sukshma Sharira, which is your subtle body. The subtle body is the part that has you keep coming back to earth to learn lessons and to go through different karmic experiences. So it's the Sukshma Sharira that is actually gaining experience and is where the lessons are learned. But in order to liberate the soul, we can work with the mind so that it doesn't create more karmas and doesn't continue to cloud the ability to experience soul fully. So in these bodies, we have this opportunity. We have this opportunity to use these tools of Ayurveda, of yoga, to liberate, to harness the power of the mind in order to liberate the soul. And the other faculty, so we mentioned this faculty of manas, which is the mind that's in duality. I like, I don't like, move towards or away from. That's its duality. But you have this other faculty of the mind, which is called buddhi. Now, buddhi, a buddha is one who has a perfected buddhi. So your buddhi, and each one of you has this faculty inside of your antahkarana, inside of these this energetic organ of helping you perceive the world, also loosely known as mind. You have this faculty of buddhi, which allows for reasoning and intellect. And buddhi can be, when a buddhi is perfected and one becomes a buddha, it simply is a mirror, or I think of it like a crystal, like a clear crystal. If you have a clear white crystal, I have one right here on my altar. If you have a clear white crystal, this crystal, whatever color light you shine into it, it will take on, right? Or if you put the crystal in the darkness, it won't emanate light, but a light needs to come through it. So the light of the soul can come through the crystal of your buddhi, and the buddhi is what allows your soul to animate you, to shine through you, allows the soul to speak through you. And so part of our work with antakarana, or freedom from the past, is to enhance the clarity of our buddhi, to enhance the clarity of our buddhi, so more and more of our soul shines through. So more and more of our true self shines through. And the more that the light of the true self illuminates and animates the buddhi, the more the easier it is to shed those layers of not self. Layers of not self meaning the dead past that has veiled our ability to see clearly. It just veils the ability of the buddhi to do its job. I know these are a lot of new terms, and I also said I wasn't going to go so deep into it, but I just love this topic, and it's so juicy, and it's so applicable to what we're talking about. So start to familiarize yourself with these. The whole thing, the whole take-home message here is that you're not the mind. You are the soul. You are the soul who has an antakarana, who has these faculties of mind. And it is the mind, the mental body, that has the imprints from the past. So the only way to reconcile or to resolve or to heal is to bring the light of consciousness, of truth, of the wholeness, compassion into the parts that have forgotten, and to bring the healing from there. So all of our healing conversations therapeutically in Ayurvedic therapeutics are about facilitating this conversation between soul via buddhi into bringing the light into the places that have been stuck, stagnant, hypervigilant, stuck in fear, whatever they may be. And that's the place that they resolve from. Now, this is a very empowering approach for the short term, you can borrow the buddhi of your teacher or of your facilitator, therapist, guide, healer, whoever it is that you're working with to facilitate the resolution. You borrow their buddhi, and someone who has a little bit more resourced, just a little bit more resourced than you in a particular area. It doesn't have to mean the totality. This is not a game of like better than, less than. It's like if there's a certain integration that someone has and they're qualified to facilitate that for you, it just massively shortens the learning curve of you being able to borrow the buddhi of who's facilitating for you. And in that, but they facilitate you to awaken your buddhi to soul. And in that process, resolve those past pains. And then it gets easier and easier for you to do. So ultimately, whoever you work with for support and facilitating, you want to make sure that they're not creating tendency on helping to liberate you and train and condition you to orient to that North Star and to sharpen your buddhi so that you can continue that expansion, if you will. So you're not the mind. When I say you're not the mind, or when you hear this term, when you hear this phrase, I mean, not term, when you hear this phrase, you're not the mind or you're not the thoughts, of course we don't go around consciously thinking, I am my thoughts. No, we have thoughts that are unsupportive to our well-being, health, and wholeness, but we believe those thoughts and they cause us pain. And that's when we're actually identifying with the thoughts. We believe the thoughts are true. So when there are feelings, sensations, thoughts, or memories that are painful or that feel, that are laden with anger, frustration, disassociation, numbness, sadness, grief, fear, terror, we know that there's some untruth that's happening, but that doesn't minimize the experience of what's happening. So we can't just think our way out of it. And that's where we transition into this, like, okay, well, how is mind and body, how are mind and body integrating in that way? And what's the therapeutic process of resolution and of coming out of that? And so this is where, for me, the language of, there's many, many different ways to look at it, but what I'm about to share is not necessarily Ayurvedic language, but it's how I've come to understand, and how I've come to practically apply these concepts of antakarna and of clarifying the mind and of clarifying the buddhi and all of that. And just to give you a little bit of background on where I'm coming from is that for many, many years of my life, my whole life, at least from adolescence until my early to mid 20s, I didn't understand why I had night terrors, panic attacks. I had particularly a lot of anxiety, but it was mostly in the middle of the night. And if I was honest, that's when I accepted that I was really having this challenge. But when I look back now from where I sit today, I was in constant anxiety all the time. I just internalized it and I was very calm on the outside. Maybe some of you can relate to that. Inside you're freaking out, but everybody else thinks that you're fine, right? You are able to present yourself in a way that people still lean on you and come to you, right? And they're like, oh, you're so, whatever, you've got it all together. But that was not the case I mean, I don't think people thought I had it all together, but I just had that experience where internally I felt one way, and externally I think I presented in a different way. And then during that time period of my life too, I was in a relationship, or when I was in relationships, when there was intimacy, I would completely shut down and like have these weird flashbacks that were not totally visual, but they were in my body, and I felt like I was being attacked, and I felt like I was being violated, and it was so confusing for me. I started having all kinds of reproductive issues and pains, and I started going to all these gynecologists, and like I kind of pushed all the relationships out of my life because I didn't know what was happening, and I was very ashamed and quiet about it. And so I started going to all these doctors, and I had all these like weird pain complexes, including, you know, monthly cycle issues and migraines that would shut me down, digestive things. I couldn't eat like hardly anything. It was just like everything in that region of my body inflamed and hurt and really painful. But none of the doctors had any answers. They were like, well, all your tests come back, they check off like you're fine. But I was like, I'm not fine. I'm constantly in pain. I can't eat anything. I'm shut down for days every single month because of these migraines. And somehow I just take pills and push through it so I can keep working my 2 jobs that I was working. And um, at that time, I was in New York City too. So I was commuting all over the city, and just like, it was so energetically intense for me. But I was so frustrated, and I felt so frustrated and alone. And luckily, I ended up finding Ayurveda. And so I'll fast forward quickly in the story for the sake of brevity. But several years later of self study and traveling to India and apprenticing and then going to Ayurveda school, most of my physical symptoms started resolving in terms of the things that the Western doctors said um, I couldn't, like, that were, nothing was wrong, but yet I was like in pain, and also had very acute symptoms like like bleeding when I was going to the bathroom, like all kinds of like weird stuff. So it was like, no, something's really happening. I just don't know why. Like, it wasn't just, you know, at least in my mind at that time, I had a negative connotation with the term psychosomatic. I was like, it's not just all in my mind. There's something really happening. Now I realize psychosomatic does not mean it's all in your mind and you can think your way out of it. It's just showing that any like pain complex or illness that checks out in the doctors or has lasted for more than, you know, a couple of 2, 3, 4 months has a psychological emotional component. Always does. So there's always something connected. Doesn't mean it's the only thing. At that point, there's a physiological thing too. But psychosomatic is simply just referring to there's something in the psychology that's affecting the soma. Hence, body and mind are inextricably interwoven and connected. So, so just tying back to that story, because obviously there's a point here that I want to bring to you that I hope to be valuable to you, is that, excuse me, I ended up in Ayurveda school, and most of my symptoms were pacified, and the tissues started restoring, and I was able to eat again, and, you know, the headaches dramatically reduced, my cycles regulated, but I was still having some night terrors. I didn't want to admit it, but I still had like a lot of disturbance in the night, and I didn't know why, and I still was like keeping relationships of any intimate kind like away, and if there was any closeness in that way, I would still have these things hijack my nervous system. And so finally, when I was in Ayurveda school, and I hope this isn't TMI for you all, but it just feels like an important and vulnerable thing for me to share, because this is really where the things that I'm teaching you is coming from. It's coming from the last 12 years of trying to figure this out on my own and finding a lot of transformation and resolution as a result. And because I've been also supporting people for all this time, I've seen it not just with myself, but scientifically, methodically kind of proven through the system of Ayurvedic medicine that I've been taught, but also with this unique kind of angle of emotional therapeutic work that I really needed. Because when I was in Ayurveda school, I got the most disturbing phone call at the time in my life, which was from an FBI agent. And when they called me, they were questioning me about some man from my past that was like connected to my family and that had abused a lot of girls in the neighborhood. And so I got this call and I was like, I didn't remember anything. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. This person means nothing. Like what you're saying means nothing to me. I don't have any information for you. I'm sorry. I don't think I was ever affected by that. But it was interesting because just that little spark of conversation opened up a whole new realm of healing for me and had me realize, oh, I thought I was crazy all these years when I had these somatic hijacks of my nervous system, feeling like I was being attacked, and then panic attacks in the middle of the night, and all of this anxiousness and fear that held me captive all day long, if I was honest. And it was very interesting because I, before the phone call, and several years before that phone call, when I had gone to India and had my first pulse diagnosis read by my teacher there and a second doctor there. Both of them listened to my pulses on separate occasions, and they asked me, "Oh, do you have any history of sexual abuse?" And to both of them, I said no, because I was like, I was like, no, because I didn't have any visual memory of it. I didn't have any conscious memory of it. And then the third pulse reading that I got was when I got to Ayurveda school with Dr. Ladd, and he listened to my pulse and he asked me the same question. And I was just like, all right, something's weird here. Why are all three of these very world renowned pulse readers, very steeped in Ayurveda for very many decades, why do they know something about, why are they asking me this? Now, they never pushed anything or implied anything, but they asked the question, all three of them. So that was in the back of my mind. And then this phone call came from the FBI agent, and I said no to him too. But I was like, whoa, as soon as he asked me those questions, then I started waking up in the middle of the night with other memories, and it unlocked something. But luckily, because I was in Ayurveda school and I had laid this foundation of, which we'll get into next, which are the therapeutic phases, I had laid this foundation of creating safety in my nervous system and in my body. I was able to handle the surfacing of some of these memories and to start resolving them. Now, it still took me several more years to actually feel like I had come to a place of deep resolution in all of them, like energetically. But this is why I'm teaching what I'm teaching today, is because even though I had this foundation of Ayurveda and I knew what to do every single day to create the, to, I see it as like preparing the garden. It's like you're preparing the garden, you're tilling the soil, maybe not tilling the soil, but you're creating a nutrient rich soil and you're planting these seeds and you're watering them every day. They're getting sun every day. You're tending to them every day. And in some ways, in a lot of ways, the practices, daily practices of Ayurveda, including the practices I taught you at the beginning of this session today, start to create that foundation of safety and the smoothing of your prana body so that mind and physical body can have better communication with one another. So you facilitate the harmonious interrelation of these different bodies that you have through daily practice of pranayama. Not to mention that the early morning each day, or the beginning of the day each day, is analogous, it's a microcosm to the beginning early days or the early years of your life. So if there were childhood traumas specifically, um, doing a morning practice of wholeness and connection to soul and spirit is essential for rewriting. But I've found that no matter when the past pain occurred, doing a morning practice still helps you proactively set that stage and foundation. Um, so even though I had all of these tools in Ayurveda, there was still a part of me that felt totally alone and confused and disoriented after getting this news. And then eventually I had several conversations with that FBI agent as memories started unfolding, and then all of this confirmation from other girls in my family and friends in the neighborhood, and we started tying all these pieces back. It was devastating and illuminating, but also relieving at the same time, because there's relief in that, like, I'm not crazy. Like, the things that I've been triggered by actually had a root, and now I know, and now I can heal it because I've become aware. And there was this, like, not aloneness, because all these other, women were affected. I wished that they weren't affected, but it was healing for us to reconnect with one another. Um, and and I felt really fortunate. I felt like it was an act of God's grace that God put me in this scenario where I could be held under a spiritual teacher, also the Ayurvedic teacher, because Dr. Ladd's a very spiritually realized being. So to be in that energy field and to be able to do the practices I was doing every day was foundation, was like a tether of light in the middle of this dark, confusing time. And still, I didn't know what to do with all of these conflicting feelings and emotions and experiences, because there was a part of me that just wanted to forgive this person, and then there was a part of me that was enraged and justifiably enraged, and then there was a part of me that was devastated, and there's a part of me that was confused, and there's a part of me that was in grief of what my little child went through. And then there was a part of, right, like there was a part of me that was enraged for all the other girls, and then there was a part of me, the layer after layer after layer, enraged on the global epidemic of this, of pedophilia and all of it, and then also had compassion for perpetrators and what did they go through. And so, like, I started just diving into all these different layers, but I was confused in that I didn't know what to do with it all, and I didn't know how to reconcile it all and and create more peace inside of me, which is what I craved. I was like, I just didn't want to be pulled in all these directions constantly. So this work and this therapeutic process that I want to share with you now has been really, after, I guess, the last, like, probably 6 years of facilitating it full time, 6 or 7 years. Not it was developed partially for myself because I went through that journey, but interestingly enough, all of the beautiful beings, probably majority women, but also handfuls of men, over my practice over the years, is like the universe just kept bringing me people that had these similar types of challenges that I went through, that were somehow these past painful imprints from the past that not always were sexual trauma in nature, but very, very many so. And at the very least, they were some kind of, past painful imprint from childhood, whether it was neglect or other types of abuse, psychologically, verbally, emotionally. And then not all of it was only childhood, but just in the past in general during, developmental years, or during just times of their life where they experienced these imprints. And so, me being on that journey myself and diving into other training and immersive experience through therapeutic processes um, has allowed me to resolve for myself and also to facilitate that with others, and just see how Ayurveda specifically and uniquely can weave in these tools, these modalities of, of therapeutic healing and transformation that might be in some ways more like Western psychology based, but they're all very somatically based. And they work with the subconscious mind, which is clearing the chitta and shining up the buddhi, so that the buddhi is clear reflection of soul. And, a lot of like spiritual healing and all of that. But really, they all come together in a very pragmatic, natural approach that I've seen cycle after cycle after cycle of working with clients, groups, retreats, one on one, over long periods of time, because I like working with a client for 6 months minimum, you know, and usually 6 months is a sweet spot because some people like to continue beyond, and they'll work for a year or two with me just so that they're always in the conversation with me, but not because they still need me, but because, oh, there's resolution, and there's ever evolving, expanding ways to connect more with my truer and truer, alignment or way of being. But 6 months is like that sweet spot in that it's hard to just go do some kind of, a trauma clearing or somatic work on a one-off session, because when we're in that hijack mode and we just go for a one-off session, there's no rapport, there's no sense of safety or trust. There's like, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself after I have this experience. How do I integrate it? I have no one to talk to about it. Like, right? So I've really appreciated these longer containers, because someone can actually enter into that container of care, or a program of real care, where they have access to someone's buddhi and to a higher insight, and they know that that person's gonna be there dependably for them every day, the next week, the next month, and even the next year, if that's how it continues, if they want that. So it's simultaneously empowering, but also like this really safe um, container that someone can drop into. And so this is all part of phase one. So I'll summarize the three therapeutic phases, so you have this like deeper practical understanding of how this works, and how you can resolve. And by the way, if you are feeling called to any kind of one-on-one work, um, I'd be happy to have like a little intro session sort of with you. So if you do want one-on-one guidance, I do set time aside in my schedule from my normal one-on-one clients that I work with. Um, I call them trauma clearing consults. And in this, we do an assessment, and it will offer you a personalized, like step-by-step plan to help you resolve whatever, get the freedom from the pain of the past, and so that like how to move forward. So whether or not you were to work with me in like a 6-month program or so, you'll still be clear on your next steps and have more of a personalized plan based on your unique past, your unique situation, your unique body responses. And so obviously there's only so much we can share in a community workshop setting, in terms of specificity. But if you do feel called to go more personalized, or to just speak with me one-on-one, I'd be really honored and grateful to support you. And I can give you that link at the end of today's class. So let's go through the three therapeutic stages, and then we will wrap up with a brief chanting and wrap up for today. Just checking in on the questions real quick. Maria says, beautiful. Is manas considered part of the physical body or form in Ayurveda? Great question, Maria. So manas, you probably asked this a little bit ago when I was talking about the Antakarna, but let me track back before I get into the therapeutic phases. So manas is considered a part of Antakarna, which is the way that you perceive the world around you. And Antakarna is more, it exists in the subtle body. It exists in, oh, hi, nice to see your face. It exists in the subtle body, but all of our subtle body is even considered material body. So while manas isn't considered our most gross physical, it still is considered part of our quote unquote lower nature, meaning the aspect of us that is born out of sattva, rajas, and tamas, or the basic mahagunas, the three primary energies of when consciousness descends into matter. It creates these lower energies, or these three subtle these qualities that everything else in life spawns from. So manas, and also in Ayurveda, the physical body is considered a crystallization of the mind. So in that way, they're both gross body, because the physical body is simply a denser version of the energetic body, of the mind, of the emotions. And so in that way, they're the same. But for mostly we talk about it as manas is part of Antakarna. It's part of the mental faculties and part of the mind. But Antakarna, manas, mind, every aspect of your mind exists in every cell of your body. And every cell of your body is a center of consciousness. So every part of us is microcosm, macrocosm. And so the center of every tiny microscopic cell is the center of consciousness, and has faculties of Antakarna. I hope that helps. Thank you for asking. Since I'm in the chat box right now, I'm just going to put down for anyone who wants to take advantage of those Ayurvedic trauma clearing consults and get the personalized plan. And if you're watching this as a recording, the link is just in the, what do you call it, the little description box below the YouTube video. Okay, so the three phases are, first, phase one, and you can write it like this in your notes, the therapeutic phases of past pain resolution. So freedom from the past happens, what I found most effectively, in these three phases. Phase one is called safety. Safety happens on the level of physical. So first, creating safety in the nervous system. Ayurveda is brilliant at doing this, because the first thing in Ayurveda to heal any dis-ease or illness is to pacify Vatadosha. And Vata dosha is the element of wind in the body, and it's responsible for nerve transmission, and it is responsible for the taking in. Prana is a refined part of Vata, and that's what takes information in through the five senses. So Vata dosha lives in your ears, nose, mouth, tongue, ears, and skin. Eyes, did I say eyes? In your five sense organs. And it brings information in. So Ayurveda is brilliant at, teaching us practices like abhyanga, oiling the whole body and the skin, to create a sense of safety. In Ayurvedic postpartum care, or the very first thing when a baby comes out of the womb, to help their nervous system therefore the rest of their body and experience of the world around them, to transition from the warm, cozy, fluid darkness of the womb into a very different environment, air and light and sound. The first thing that they do is coat the baby in warm sesame oil. And they do that every day for the mama as well. And this is to help the nervous system regulate into a new environment. So this is one of the ways, one of the practices that Ayurveda empowers us with for calming the nervous system and specifically creating safety in the nervous system. This helps regulate the nervous system. So creating safety in the nervous system on a physical level, plus there are Ayurvedic practices for all the senses. You want to make sure the senses aren't being overused, underused, misused. These all cause an agitation in the nervous system. So there are other things that we look at. But also we need to support Agni, which is your digestive fire, because your digestive fire digests, absorbs, assimilates not only nutrients from the foods that you eat, but again, it digests, absorbs, and assimilates everything that comes in through your eyes, mouth, nose, skin, and ears. And it digests all of your thoughts, all of your feelings, all of your emotions, all of your memories. And so we need to optimize the digestion and get the fire burning healthily so that we feel strong, clear, resilient. If we want to get rid of mental fog and help support buddhi, we need to eat right. We need to have good digestion. And we can do that Ayurvedically before we even get into any reprocessing stuff or the reprocessing of heavy stuff, because we set that fire into a healthy flame that allows us to enter into it not unresourced, but resourced as possible emotionally. And I like to use the analogy of, like, imagine going into a forest at night and you send a little kid unarmed with no support into a forest at night. That forest looks very big, dark, and scary, is full of scary sounds, and is a very different place than, say, a warrior up on top of a horse with shields and, weapons going through down that same dark path in the forest. It looks like a completely different place, right? And the same thing of creating safety in the nervous system allows us to experience a little bit more resilience, a little bit more resourcefulness, an increase of clarity of perception. And then we kind of started with the gross levels of the physical body, but we also work with the prana, with the pranic body, harmonizing the system, dilating the channels. So there's good flow of communication between all the bodily parts. And then this goes all the way to the spiritual self, connecting to soul, connecting to witness consciousness, connecting to a power greater than us. The power that created us is the only power that can heal us. So all of this is in phase one, where we don't preemptively go into the reprocessing. We only go into the reprocessing when it's ripe. So phase one is about ripening. And then when you get into phase two, which phase two, as I just said, is called reprocess. And during reprocess, there are very specific tools and modalities that I've personally drawn upon from some spiritually oriented psychological therapies that lend themselves really well to Ayurveda. And they're not Ayurvedic specific, but the language and the application is Ayurvedic. They're just different approaches for different unique people that work. Because really, under the umbrella of Ayurveda is every possible healing modality in existence, because Ayurveda is like the original. It's the source of healing. It's the source of all medicine. Even Chinese medicine came out of Ayurveda. Even Tibetan medicine came out of Ayurveda. Ayurveda has originated all of surgery, OBGYN, all of pediatrics, all of today's modern medicines actually have their roots in ancient Ayurveda. So Ayurveda empowers us, but it also gives us with these tools, but also is an umbrella for all these other modalities to fit inside of. And if you are a modality practitioner, you'll find that studying and learning Ayurveda allows for a greater context for your clients to heal as well. And then if you as an individual are doing self-healing, you'll find that practicing Ayurveda for yourself every single day and getting to learn it more and more, it creates this foundation where you get to know your true self better, your unique nature and yourself better, that you can, when you need certain modalities, and then it will be supportive for you. So I found particularly phase one, it creates a ripening of really whatever has been stuck in you or has like held you back, or these imprints that hijack the nervous system. Basically, they start to soften in phase one, and they kind of start to bubble to the surface. But when they're gently bubbling to the surface, just like a fruit ripens on a tree, you gently coax the fruit or vegetable to see if it's ripe and ready to come off. And then that's part of our, meeting every week or every other week is, okay, let's see what's been alive in your consciousness, what's been alive in dream time, what has been in the forefront of your emotions, like what's been your emotional experience. Let's see if there's something that's ripe that wants to be reprocessed, moved through, released, cleared, reoriented to, seen with a new perspective, felt, known, touched, connected to. What part of you was hurt that is, feels safe enough to come out? Like if we're using inner child language, if that child has been like tied up in a closet hiding, maybe they start to feel safe as a result of phase one. And they actually realize, oh, you're showing up and trying to care for me every day. You're leaving food by the door every day, even though I've been too scared to come out. And then slowly the child, starts to come forward and will start eating that food and start realizing where the food's coming from and start to trust that person. In the same way, if you've ever, had a rescue animal that you've adopted, usually they're really fearful at first, or they might even hiss at you, or swat at you, or bark at you, or snarl and kind of stay in the corner. They're really trying to protect themselves. Same thing happens with our traumas or our inner children that were hurt, or whatever past part of us is frozen in the past. It has this hurt. It really wants to be helped, but it's still scared. That process of phase one, the ripening of creating safety, it's like every day you're doing these practices Ayurvedically to support the calming of the nervous system. You're feeding your body regularly, you're sleeping more consistently, regularly, you're maintaining, these practices that are supportive. And slowly that animal like example, they start to finally come towards you and take the food, but maybe they don't let you pet them yet. And then maybe they eventually towards you and like sniff your hand, and eventually they let you pet them, and eventually maybe they let you hold them, and eventually they even come into your house. You get the analogy. Well, it's not a personal thing that our nervous system has been hijacked or frozen in a past pain. This is, when we can see it through this lens of like, oh, I actually have the power to connect to soul and allow soul to come in and make a clear channel for soul to come in and offer this support to the parts of me that were hurt and that are healing. So this is all phase two. You created the safety, and now you reprocess the pain, or you reinvite in the part of you that has been exiled or off, and afraid and alone and protected and fearful. So I'm using all these metaphors for what can happen during the therapeutic process, but there are a number of modalities that I found to be really, really effective. And again, if you want more of a personalized approach or more of a personalized recommendation, then you can book that one-on-one time with me, and I can share the approach that would be most effective for you, or that in our assessment that I would imagine would be most effective for you, or expect to be most effective for you in a more clear recommendation. And then finally, phase 3. So phase 1, we have safety. Phase 2, we have reprocessing. And phase 3, we have integrate. So once you've connected with spirit, you've created safety on all of those levels, witness consciousness, and you've supported that light to come into the dark corners of the psyche and reprocess the past pain, or reintegrate some estranged part of you back into the whole, because that's another thing that happens during traumatic imprints or past painful memories or early childhood traumas or developmental traumas, is there's a part of our psyche that actually fragments. So our fragmented existence, we then switch from fragment to fragment to fragment, or all these different kind of seemingly separate parts of us are constantly talking at the same time. And our true self is not actually connecting in. We're identifying with these parts because they're fragmented, we only have the opportunity to switch to their limited perspectives and points of view. So what we want to do is connect with soul, with the true source of light, life, and healing, and bring that fragmented part back to the whole. So then we move from fragmented back to wholeness. And that's part of the integration process. So we reprocess whatever the painful memory was, or through various modalities that helps release and integrate in your system. And then we bring it back home. And once that part of you, or that memory, or that painful imprint is unburdened from the system, a whole new aspect of you comes to the surface, arrives, and comes up, and that integration. So, and then you carry that into your day-to-day life. So let me give you an example. If a child part was really hurt and it lost all of its joy, it had to grow up too soon, it was taking care of all of its siblings, younger sibling or something, because the parents weren't there for whatever reason, or the parents were either neglectful or abusive, and that child had to grow up too soon. Perhaps that child didn't really loved dancing, but they didn't get to dance because they were in survival mode from too young. And then they held that in a fragmented corner of your psyche for decades of your life, until it started creating illness in your health, or this complex of hijacking the nervous system and feeling disassociated, whatever was your external symptom. When we unburden it from that and reprocess it, now it's free to explore something that it always really loved or wanted to do. And once it's free, it can return to its naturalness. So perhaps in this example, that child is like, oh, if I don't have to take care of everyone and everything around me, or I don't have to live in fear constantly, then what would I do? And it's an embodied experience for you to feel lighter and to have released that. It's like, oh, well, now I just naturally move and dance, or naturally create art and beauty, or naturally engage in this thing that I've always loved, but I just couldn't do for whatever reason. It was being held back. So, this is part of integration. So, now we create the space for that newly unburdened part of you to return to naturalness, whatever that naturalness is for the part. You might not even know now what the naturalness is for the part because it's just revealed when after the unburdening happens. So this is the beauty of phase 3. When that integration happens and the return to naturalness, you usually reunite with a part of you that you didn't even know you missed. But you're like, oh, it's like coming home to myself because now I feel just like so natural and free to move or to sing or to play or to do this thing that I've been passionate about or inspired for my whole life. But I just like couldn't even admit it to myself. Does that make sense? So those are 3 therapeutic phases, and obviously there are ways to there are very innumerable ways to personalize this approach to each of you individually. And so I hope that offering some insights on the faculties of the mind and, from an Ayurvedic perspective, as well as starting to see how mind and body integrate with one another and just looking through different perspectives and lenses on freedom from pain from the past, as well as these, at least an overview of the therapeutic process. I hope that this was supportive for you and illuminating or enlightening and practical in some way. When it comes back to practicality, continue doing those practices that we did in the beginning of today's session every day. And then if you want to expand more in a personalized setting, or you're really ready to resolve and let go of the things that have been burdening you internally, and you want to feel safe in your body, you want to feel healthy in your body, you want to have a clear mind, and you're ready to find out, meet and reintegrate all those parts of you that may be burdened with other things, reconnect with soul and spiritual direction for your life in a wholesome way, then by all means take advantage of the spots that I've opened in my calendar. I'd love to meet you and talk with you one-on-one. So you can book the Ayurveda trauma clearing consult. They're complimentary consults, and you'll get a personalized plan from it. And if we feel like we'd be a good fit to work together in like a more immersive 6-month program, we can talk about that if it even wants to go in that direction. But it doesn't have to ever go in that direction. I'm just here for you, and we'll offer you a personalized plan regardless. So just know that link below the recorded video or in your chat will take you to my calendar. It'll explain a little bit more of what the Ayurvedic trauma clearing consult is, and then you can book it if you'd like, and then you'll just be on my calendar, and we'll meet here on Zoom, but it'll just be one-on-one in a different Zoom room, of course. But yeah, I hope this was supportive. If there's any other questions, I'd be more than happy to reflect on those. And otherwise, we will wrap up for today and sing our closing prayers. And I'll put the closing prayers in the box. Most of you probably know this. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Oh, I see a hand up. Om Shanti. Whose little hand is that? Sue.
Hi, Alicia. It's been
Hi,
a long
Sue.
time.
Oh, it's so nice to see you.
I'm so happy to see you. And I just have to say, I've been practicing Ayurveda myself for many, many years. I studied with Dr. Ladd. Mm-hmm. And it's only been now. I mean, I graduated from his program in 1989. And I've been practicing Ayurveda very deeply, personally, and sharing with other people like you do very freely. I really appreciate your generosity so much. I want to acknowledge you for being so true. You just bring tears to my eyes because you're so true to Ayurveda. You're one of the few people I've met in all these years, and we've never met, but I feel like I've met you. I'm open to you spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, socially, relationally. And I can't say that about many people I've known in my life. I mean, I'm now at a stage where I'm allowing the biology of trauma to come to the surface. I think I'm in that second stage you're talking about personally, where I've got enough grounding spiritually to be a safe place for my own trauma to story parts to talk to me, to a person who's safe to listen to and who's able to be present without the vata flitting. Just I mean it's taken years to get to this point. I'm so grateful on one hand, and I'm what I'm wanting to do here is just acknowledge your greatness. I really mean this. You're one of the, I still have such deep issues with safety and support. That first stage, I haven't even been a person of safety and support to my own self. I offer that to other people with my life, but I'm realizing I haven't been that for myself. I allow myself to be in situations that when I've dissociated and distanced myself from myself, I put myself in situations that are injurious. So it's just this rewounding, and you're so safe. You're so supportive. You're so qualified. I mean, I shop around, I'm still not in a place where I can open myself up to even be in a one-on-one with someone, except I'm doing that with you here in front of everyone because I feel so safe. And the distinction that you offer is the spiritual component. Trauma is like the cutting edge work on the planet right now. It seems like there's a mass collective coming to the surface. It's like panchakarma that's, driving all the toxins, to the surface. And we're having to now wipe that away, wipe that clean. We're in that process now. But most of the people who are doing this work, using this technology on the planet, don't offer the spiritual component that you're offering. And because I've been developing the spiritual component myself all these years, I'm able to recognize that, and I'm only able to go so far with it's more the science world, the science of trauma work. But when we separate the science of the work from the spirituality of the work, it's only part of the work. I just want to acknowledge you, and on behalf of people who are here with you today and who will be tuning in, I'm not paid to give this endorsement, but I've been jumping in on your generosity for some years now. And I'm just at a point now where I can acknowledge you with such understanding. And your own vulnerability. This is a demonstration that you have done your work and you're doing your work, and obviously you're a safe place within your own self. You've obviously graduated your own self, that you must be whole and integrated yourself in order to be so vulnerable, in order to share your story without being trapped back, drawn back into it, and pulled back down into the I call it a quicksand, just a quicksand. So I don't know, I could go on and on. I just want to appreciate you and thank you so much from the bottom of my heart and the depth of my soul.
I have tears in my eyes. I don't want to speak any. I don't even speak.
I know.
So moved. And it's just so good to hear your voice. And I want to confirm that feeling that you said in the beginning. Like I've always felt a soul connection with you, even though we haven't met. And just seeing your name pop up on social media or on one of these classes, I'm always like, yay, Sue's here, like
I feel that
it's so sweet. And I've always felt your encouragement of teaching, and I thank you. And there's so many times I wanted to give up on teaching this, especially because I knew I had to weave in my story, and I was terrified to. And it took many, many years to be able to say it matter of factly and not feel, emotion. Yeah. And so for you to offer that reflection and insight is very meaningful. And I echo that to also inspire and encourage everyone here who's listening, who also has experienced trauma, who is afraid to remember the story themselves or to share it. Because the first time it happened when I was in yoga school, Ayurveda school, and then I told the story, I couldn't tell it to anyone for another 8 months. I was so thrown off by, sharing it. The first time I could share it took many months, and then I started sharing it in groups of my intimate clients and retreats, and then I couldn't talk for 2 years. But it was like I felt more and more comfortable, but then I would have to recoil and integrate. And so, gosh, there was just so many times and that I felt like I can't do this anymore. Like I don't identify with, and I genuinely don't even identify with the trauma anymore after going through the layers of rage and all of those feelings that I had mentioned. I actually did arrive at a place of genuine forgiveness, but you can only arrive at a place of genuine forgiveness. And then it transcends forgiveness, because it's like, I just thank you. And then it's just like, now it was just a karmic exchange that I had with this person that has literally created where I am in this moment today as the spiritual being I am. So it's like, but you can't start there. Like we've heard the concept, the wound is where the light enters. Mm-hmm. But until we actually go through the reprocessing and feel safe, the safety is just so important. And I just so honor, every little bit of what you shared, and your honesty and vulnerability of, knowing that you've been in that on and off in the safety phase, and it's hard to find. I totally agree with you. The spirit is taken out of most of the trauma healing. It's become, and thank God, it's beautiful that it's like a normalized conversation, at least in some, arenas, maybe more the circles that we all associate with. It's at least a little bit more of a normalized conversation. And for those of us who are craving something deeper, or who have found the limitations of just the mind-body approach, then realize, oh, the mind-body-spirit approach is what I've, been missing.
Right.
And that's the beauty and the glory of Ayurveda and Dr. Ladd's lineage, is that it's spirit, mind, body.
Yes.
It's not mind, body. Yes. It's not body, mind. It's not body, mind, spirit. It's spirit, mind, body, more in that order of, importance, or North Star is spirit. So I give all the gratitude and glory to Ayurveda and to our spiritual teachers, spiritual masters that have really illuminated the way for us and helped us integrate.
So just one question that is coming to mind when you describe the three stages, and you just mentioned spirit, mind, body. Would it be accurate to see the first stage? You mentioned Vata, and then safety and support, because Vata is subject to fear, anxiety, and security. So obviously, when Vata is subject to fear, anxiety, insecurity, safety and support is essential for the first stage. That just focus on creating an environment within oneself and around oneself of safety and support before going on. So could that be called a Vata stage in the process? And then the second stage that you talked about, the what did you call it? You called it the reprocessing. Could that be considered a pitta stage, a mind stage, where we're actually beginning to digest the experience that we're having? We've supported the Agni, the digestive fire, in the first stage. Now we've got a digestive fire in the second stage where we can actually process. We have digestive fire, and we can allow whatever is hidden down in there to come to the surface. We have an environment of safety and support for the experience to come to the surface. We've got the digestive fire that gives us the light. We can see in the darkness now. We can see, oh, look what's lurking around. Look at all of the creatures, stumbling around in the dark, but we have some light on them now. And of course, we bring that safety and support into the second phase, but it's a pitta stage now. Pitta meaning it brings that fire and light and that heat, so that gradually it's the experience is digesting. Would that be correct? And so that's a pitta stage. And then would it be correct to go on to the third stage? Would that be considered then a kapha stage? The integration, the movement from fragmentation to wholeness, it's building, it's rebuilding, it's actually building a new structure, a whole new structure. We're like birthing, we're like our own womb for our own new self. So it's a Vata, Pitta, Kapha, spirit, mind, body, in those three stages of ripening, reprocessing, and integration. Would that be accurate?
This is a beautiful inquiry. I think I think from Vata Pitta Kapha standpoint, Vata Pitta and Kapha could be in all three phases, but I think what you're speaking to is more of the essence of each. So Prana, Tejas, Ojas, perhaps. So Prana, Tejas, Ojas are the pure, most refined aspects of each Vata, Pitta, Kapha. So perhaps Prana in the first stage is it's not quite like, because Tejas is the pure transformational power, and then Ojas is the essence of that holding, of that nurturance. Prana is more of the movement of kind of ripening, perhaps. So I think more what you're speaking to is potentially Prana, Tejas, Ojas, but Prana, Tejas, Ojas, and Vata, Pitta, Kapha are really in all three stages. Yeah, I haven't found precise Ayurvedic equivalents for the stages, but I think this is a beautiful inquiry that lends itself a little bit more to the essences, because the essences of each dosha are refined and supportive to the system no matter what. The Vata, Pitta, and Kapha are more gross, and they're not actually always supportive to the system. You want them to be constantly moving and leaving the body and the system. So that's why they might not, like, as a doshic lens, that those labels aren't perfect for the phases. But
Okay.
Prana, Tejas, Ojas is a little bit more closer and a little bit more refined, although all three of each can be in each
Mm.
phase as well. Because when you think of it through the lens of typology and emotion, um, the first phase can bring up all three types of
Mm.
emotional experiences or sensations in the body, and we need to pacify each one depending on the unique individual. Whether, yeah, there's vata, as I mentioned, because that's like the predominant in the nervous system, but whoever I'm speaking to unique would have a unique way that their doshas are presenting themselves and that they need to be balanced. And so if that's the case and they have excess pitta or kapha in phase one, well, we need to work on pacifying those immediately. And when we cleanse and pacify those, it will likely carry out the emotions associated. So, for example, for those of you who aren't familiar with this language, pitta is the essence of fire in the body, and in its healthy amount, it's our brightness, our brilliance, our intelligence, our passion, its ability to see clearly, think clearly, and digest food well. And so when it's in excess, it's heat, it's inflammation, it's acidity, it's autoimmune disease in its farthest progression. And so if there's excess pitta in the system, and then on a mental emotional level, pitta is also anger, rage, that type of intensity, hot emotions, if you will. And so usually as physiologically, we're cleansing that excess and cooling, calming the inflammation, reducing the pitta, reducing the acidity, decreasing, those aspects of excess heat in the body. Out with it will need to come to the surface in the reprocessing phase. It'll need to come to the surface of reprocessing the imprints of the anger, where the pitta was stored in the body from childhood. And like, so I've really seen that that's the case in vata, pitta, or kapha imbalances, especially the stubborn ones. Energetically, they happened early in life, and it's the source of the original imprint of vata, pitta, or kapha from an emotional standpoint. And from there, vata, pitta, and kapha in the environment increase, and they meet in the physiology through the emotions and the physiology, and then they increase. And so then we do a panchakarma, which is the Ayurvedic cleansing protocols, or we do, some kind of way to pacify it and release it, and out with it comes not only the physical excess of mucus of kapha, or of inflammation, of heat, of acidity, of pitta, for example. But it also brings with it its attachments, its lack of forgiveness, its stubbornness, its fear, and all of that is then also released out of the system. So they all go in all three, really, or they all are affected in each of the therapeutic phases. Such a refined and beautiful inquiry to be in. Thank you for bringing that to the surface.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. I'm just noticing that, we've gone really over today, which is beautiful and totally welcomed. I want to just open if there's any more questions. I'm more than happy to stay. Obviously, everyone can hop off as they need. And if there are no other questions or comments for today, then we can end with our closing prayer and sign off till next month. And I'll send this recording via email. For those of you who are watching this as a recording, you can register for the live sessions via email on my website, which will be linked below this video, for the Ayurveda trauma healing workshops. All right, let us thank you all for your participation and for your sweetness and for the safe space that you each contribute to this environment, and for being in the whatever beautiful inquiry you're in around healing. I hope that today's class inspired and gave some fresh perspective that's supportive, and also forgive my limitations as a teacher, as a guide, and also limitations of time. if any of you are just wanting to get questions answered for your own unique personal situation, feel free to click that calendar link, also linked below this video and the recording, and we can talk one-on-one. All right, Radhika, thank you so much as well. Thank you, Amy and Melody and Maria, Carolina, for all of your, Rebecca, Linda, for all of your comments and hearts and love and prayer hands and ohms. Let us sign off with our prayer. And thank you, Sue, for that just heartfelt, gorgeous share and reflection. I really do feel like you are a messenger from God to me today. There were some things that were very confirming, and I want to thank you on a personal note for sharing that and always being an encouraging voice in this line of service that that I'm very passionate about offering to others. So I really appreciate you, and big hug right back. All right, taking in a deep breath, let's just chant Om together once, and then we'll sing the prayer Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu 3 times through, and then we'll just close with Om Shanti and sign off. Exhaling all the air out, full deep inhale, and exhaling with Om. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Tat Sat. Om and blessings to you all. So much love. I'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Together.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia. I'm not on a video because it's so late. It's like midnight here.
Oh, yeah, you can always come to the recordings, listen to the recordings, but I'm so happy to see you here live for a moment. Thanks for joining.
And the next day, I always make notes of that.
Oh, good. Good.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you all.
I wait for your class every month.
I'm so happy to know that. We'll be back in just a couple weeks. 3 or 4 more weeks. I'll see you then.
Yes. Bye.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Radhika. Bye, Linda. Bye, Sue. Bye, Cynthia.
Bye.
Bye.